Ronda Rousey entered the world of pro wrestling with a level of hype that most wrestlers could only dream of. She was an incredibly talented UFC fighter and a lifelong WWE fan, and her wrestling debut was better than anyone ever expected it to be. But it didn't take long for wrestling fans to turn on her. In this video, we're taking a look at why Ronda Rousey went from being hailed as the baddest woman on the planet to one of the most hated women in wrestling. Ronda Rousey's arrival in WWE was really exciting. By 2018, she was already a mainstream name thanks to her dominance in the UFC. She made her surprise debut at the Royal Rumble in 2018, and just her pointing at the WrestleMania sign was enough to send the fans into a frenzy. But despite the positive reaction, Rousey was still unproven in the ring. In the lead up to WrestleMania 34, she was thrown into a storyline with Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. After a contract signing, Ronda put Triple H through a table, setting the stage for her match. It would be Ronda Rousey and Kurt Angle versus Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. In the build-up, WWE played on the fact that Ronda had never wrestled before, and truth be told, many fans had low expectations. Of course, she was a fantastic, legitimate fighter, but wrestling is a totally different game. But Rousey ended up defying all of the odds. The way she worked in the ring made her seem like a naturally gifted pro wrestler. It's like she'd been doing this for years. While nobody could quite believe how good Rousey was at wrestling, the truth of the situation was a little bit different. It turned out that the match was choreographed to within an inch of its life. Of course, all WWE matches are predetermined, but this was on a whole different level. It was later revealed that she trained for months at the Performance Center. They rehearsed every single sequence in the match to perfection. After WrestleMania, WWE quickly capitalized on her momentum. Her first feud was with Nia Jax, which led to a match at Money in the Bank for the Raw Women's Championship. That match saw Alexa Bliss interfere and cash in her Money in the Bank briefcase, which then led to a feud between Alexa and Ronda. The match between the women was 2 months away at SummerSlam, but WWE did a great job of building tension between the women. Alexa spent those weeks taunting Ronda, calling her an overhyped rookie, and she even got Ronda suspended for 30 days. The match at SummerSlam was incredibly one-sided. Bliss was absolutely dominated by Rousey, and within 4 minutes, the match was over. While Ronda's victory over Alexa Bliss was meant to make her look unstoppable, it actually backfired. One Reddit user said, "Unpopular opinion, I don't like the fact that Ronda is this powerful and realistic, because for me, wrestling is more about the show. This feels like an MMA fighter kicking the shit out of a Barbie doll." And this problem wasn't limited to Alexa Bliss. The fact that Rousey could legitimately murder all of the women on the roster became a big problem for WWE. She did defend the title on plenty of occasions. She beat the likes of Nikki Bella, Sasha Banks and Ruby Riott, but there was no escaping from the fact that most of her matches were very one-sided. There was just no other way for WWE to realistically present Ronda Rousey. Becky Lynch was one of the few wrestlers on the roster who could be perceived as a real threat to her. She'd been massively popular before getting injured, and the fans couldn't wait for her to come back. She was entered into a feud with Ronda, which was all well and good, but there was one big problem. Despite her being a heel, the fans wanted to cheer for Becky, and they did. And so by default, they started booing Ronda. Ronda was supposed to be the biggest female hero on the roster, and here the fans totally turned on her. For the first time, she was experiencing a negative reaction from the crowd, despite supposedly being the good guy, and she didn't like it one bit. Rousey versus Lynch seemed to be the plan for WrestleMania 35, but the build-up really exposed that she couldn't separate her wrestling persona from her real life self. They decided to use Twitter as one of the ways to develop the feud. As part of the story, Lynch was arrested on Raw, and she posted the mugshots on Twitter shortly after. It was obviously a storyline, but Ronda decided that she didn't want to play along. You hobbling around trying to be a ginger crutch ninja and taking fake prison photos in the hallway isn't helping. Becky tried to discourage her from calling things fake, but Ronda just got more fired up. F word, you mean fake? Fake like your nonsensical BS armbar that doesn't even work and just looks like you're holding the dick you wish you had. What a way to break the illusion of a wrestling feud by pointing out that someone's submission hold wouldn't work in real life. She even started using Becky's real name. Rebecca Quinn, I don't care what the script says, I'm beating the living shit out of you the next time I see you. The way Rousey conducted herself on social media disrespected both the wrestling business and the wrestling fans, and this basic lack of understanding as to how wrestling works was really weird. It made Ronda look like a dumbass. In the UFC, she was representing her real life self as a real life competitive sports person, but surely the first thing to know when becoming a pro wrestler is that to one degree or another you're going to be playing a character. You don't have to be Doink the Clown to understand that. The WrestleMania match became a three-way between Rousey, Lynch and Charlotte Flair. Apart from Becky Lynch, Flair was the only other woman on the WWE roster who could believably go toe-to-toe with Rousey. And Becky got some salvation for the horrible feud with Ronda as she pinned her for the victory and became the new women's champion. And that was the end of Ronda's first run in WWE, and she didn't waste any time putting them on blast. So it's just like, what am I doing it for if I'm not being able to spend my time and energy on my family, but instead spending my time and energy on a bunch of fucking ungrateful fans that don't even appreciate me? I love performing. I love the girls. I love being out there, but at the end of the day, I was just like, fuck these fans, dude. My family loves me and they appreciate me. I want all my energy to go into them. So that was my decision at the end of the day. Dealing with fans who love you one minute and hate you the next is all part of being a pro wrestler. You just have to roll with the punches, literally. Ronda obviously took this job far too personally, and she took every opportunity she could to blast the fans during this period. It's hard not to take it personally from the fans because I don't go out there as, I do go out there as a character, but I am actually Ronda Rousey, so I don't play Ronda Rousey on television, so sometimes I take it personally from the fans, not so much from the wrestlers, the fans I do. It's such pressure when I'm the last one on the show because I feel like it's my responsibility to retain the ratings and deliver, you know? In an environment as tightly scripted as WWE was at that time, for her to even think that she could just be herself was idiotic, to say the least. But despite her moaning and bitching, she made a return to WWE at the 2022 Royal Rumble. Nobody could work out why Ronda ever bothered coming back, considering how unhappy she was the first time around. And this time around, the fans were far less impressed with her. Many of the fans had heard the terrible comments she'd made about them and the wrestling business in all of those interviews. And it was another insane decision on behalf of Vince McMahon to bring her back as a good guy. She would have worked far better as a heel, but no, she came back as a babyface. She'd been gone for well over 2 years, and she just walked back in and stamped her ticket to WrestleMania. At the time, people were getting real sick of WWE's reliance on part-time wrestlers, and it seemed unlikely that Rousey was going to stick around for any more than a year or two. And even that match that she ended up in at WrestleMania was a huge disappointment. The obvious plan would have been for her to wrestle Becky Lynch at WrestleMania 38, this time with Lynch as a babyface, but that didn't happen. Instead, she lost to Charlotte Flair before beating her a month later for the women's title at Backlash in an I Quit match, and the problem with Rousey having no credible opponents was magnified this time around. She lost the title when Liv Morgan cashed in her Money in the Bank briefcase, and then they had a totally unbelievable feud. It was obvious to anybody watching that in reality, Rousey could kick the crap out of Liv in a real fight, and yet they ended up having a 2-month-long feud together. After that, she played through Raquel Rodriguez, Shotzi and Natalya. Even after all this time, the only credible opponent they could put in front of her was Charlotte Flair, who beat her in under a minute. From here on out, it was really obvious that WWE didn't know what to do with her. They ended up putting her in a tag team with Shayna Baszler, and the duo bullied their way through the women's tag division on SmackDown. But from the look on Ronda's face, you could tell that she didn't want to be there, and her in-ring work seemed to be getting worse rather than better. Her last match in the company was at SummerSlam 2023, where Shayna Baszler beat her in an MMA rules match. The fans dumped all over this, and rightly so. It was a sloppy mess that was embarrassing to watch. It wasn't for WWE fans at all. It was all MMA Easter eggs and all of these moments in MMA history that we're big geeks for. It was a nice little f*** you on the way out. You're going to sit here and watch this match that we wanted to do from the very beginning. I don't care what you think. Go get some fucking popcorn. But yeah, we loved it. Despite a positive start in WWE, Ronda Rousey just couldn't hack being a wrestler. Her skin was too thin. Let's hope she never decides to come back to the wrestling industry.